Welcome, everyone, to the new episode of the Haptics Club podcast. I'm Ashley from Titan Haptics, and I'm joined by my Haptics crew, Manu from Unity. You've got Eric from Razer. The Haptics Club is a team of people that have a passion for haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of the amazing tech and people in the space and to foster interesting discussions on the subject. We are so happy to be here for yet another seasons of Haptics Club, season 3. Beautiful. Speaking of that, right now we're joined by the co-founder of HaptX. I almost said Haptics Club again. It's HaptX, Bob Crockett. He's here to kick off our first episode of the season. Bob, thank you so much for being here. He's going to share one of the origin story of HaptX and also just a reality check on things like how haptics is hard. Hardware is hard. And that's just one of those kind of things that anyone in this space knows. And we want to dive into that. And just as like a short little snippet, the HaptX gloves are one of my favorite haptic experiences. I talk about it all the time. Joe's sick of hearing from me, but it's such an enchanting experience to have a spider walk across your hand, to be able to feel grass. So it's just a magical experience, and I'm so excited to have Bob here to talk about it, the tech, the space, entrepreneurship, so much. So, there's so much to talk about. We have an hour. We're going to divide it into a 5-minute intro, 15 minutes of questions on the area of expertise, 10 minutes on the future. Ooh, love that one. And of course, we will talk about challenges and opportunities in the haptics industry. At the 30-minute mark, we'll stop the recording. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, you're actually missing out on like the craziest part, because that's where we get to ask the juicy questions that everyone wants to ask, but we can't ask during the show. So at that point, we'll cut off the recording and then we will jam into questions and answers. But of course, the hapticsclub.com is where you need to go to learn about our upcoming guests, learn about all the crazy things we're working on, and of course, sign up to our newsletter so you'll know what's happening next. But let's get talking. I'm taking up way too much time. We need to dive right in here because I'm excited to talk to Bob. Manu, let's get cracking.
What an exciting season 3 intro. Thank you, Ashley. We can feel the excitement in your voice. Bob, I just want to ask you this first question. Can you introduce yourself to our audience, give them a little background? And I also love the Haptics Club, so I want to hear about that later.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Bob Crockett. I've been a professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California for, over 20 years now. And that continues to be my day job, but my real passion is this company, HaptX. I started it with the real driving force, the real true founder of HaptX is Jake Rubin. Over 10 years ago now, we've been at this for 10 years. I can tell you a little bit about how Jake found me. My role in this whole company was really getting things started and launched. As you can imagine, a product as complex as a pair of gloves that lets you naturally interact with virtual objects is super, super challenging. And it's a heavy lift for a big company to do. It's an even heavier lift for an entrepreneur to build the sort of capabilities to get that system going. And that's where my role was, having access to the university equipment and infrastructure and expertise. But I think it's a very interesting conversation, and I'd like to talk a little bit about it to really picture a 20-year-old college dropout cold calling a college professor and with his vision of a machine that you strap yourself into and you can't tell the difference between the real world and the virtual world. That takes some courage to do that, reaching out. And that's what started HaptX, and flash forward 10 years, it's been a lot of work, and here we are, and we're only, we've only just begun. So wonderful to be here. And I would love to talk about anything that's on your mind.
Yeah, happy to have you too. So you basically touched on my second question, which was about how you got involved with haptics, but you mentioned that as the beginning of HaptX, but was it the first experience with haptics that you had, or did you have any experience in the past?
Yeah, I mean, not only was it the first experience with haptics, it was the first experience that I had with VR. So my background is mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering, and so I knew a little bit about how the body works and how mechanisms work. But it really did take somebody coming in from the outside to expose me to this whole world. And quite honestly, this is something that I don't believe that HaptX could have started in an academic lab or a government lab or even a big company. It really kind of took the vision and drive of a 20-year-old from the world of gaming, from the world of not having a lot of preconceptions about what's the right way to do it. Very, very smart individual, did a lot of homework, did more thinking about haptics than is probably healthy, but not having the preconceptions that lead you to think about developing something in a certain way. So no, I was not a haptics expert by any stretch of the imagination. It was something that was more of an intriguing problem. I mean, in an abstract sense, when somebody comes to you and says, well, think about it. If you can pixelate the body with high enough resolution and provide the right sensations at the right pattern across your body and provide the right torques to every one of your joints and degrees of freedom, then conceptually you should be able to simulate reality perfectly across the body. And that's an interesting concept. That's an interesting concept to anybody, haptics experts or not. And it sounds audacious, and it still sounds audacious. But when you really dig down and think about how you could possibly do that, we both came to the conclusion, Jake and I, early on, that this is not something that requires a major breakthrough in physics or an army of PhDs. It's just good, solid systems engineering, where you're taking a bunch of pieces that already exist, putting them together in a novel way. And I don't want to sell it short. It's tough. It's very challenging. But it's an engineering problem, not a science problem. And we will absolutely get there to the original vision of a full body machine that is indistinguishable between the virtual world and the real world. I have complete confidence about that.
Bob, I love that answer. And in a sense, you touched on that too. Is the fact that your brain is in a black box. What makes it, feel like it's touching something? All those feelings and those electrical signals and neurons. And if you pixelate the body, you can also potentially mimic that sensation and fool the brain in a sense. And it's beautiful that you said, and it's inspiring, I think, for the audience, people that are starting on that you don't need to have a haptics background or degree or expertise to start solving nowadays solution. They sound futuristic, but like you said, it's a design solution that can be fixed. I'm excited for that. I'm going to move into the area of expertise side of our talk now, and I have more specific question about that. So you told us a little bit about how you created Haptics, the company, but what made you start, I would say, the DK2 glove? Maybe why did you start with the hands? It makes sense because haptics, touch, etc. But why? How did you start?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And honestly, when you look at the DK2, our system, and you look at what we produced and what we continue to develop, it sort of seems obvious in retrospect that you're going to start with the hands. If your vision is to eventually have a full body, the hands get you 80% of the way there, because that's we're human. We interact with the world mostly through our hands. Interestingly, it wasn't obvious to us 10 years ago that was our initial product. We spent a bunch of time exploring the different pieces of the technology, and these are the same pieces that have worked their way into our gloves. But we were exploring things like a lower body exoskeleton, and we think actually we were the first ones to have a full lower body exoskeleton that was run entirely by Unity, that provided all the physics that you need to simulate stairs and ramps and flat surfaces. And so we actually started down that path of perhaps an exoskeleton to simulate the gross motor muscles and things like golf emulators and all sorts of ideas about that. And there were a couple of reasons that we didn't pursue that as a first product. That doesn't mean that it was wasted time. We learned a heck of a lot. It will come back. But between you and me, that system scared the snot out of us, because if you have a lower body exoskeleton that is strong enough to support a 95th percentile male running upstairs, then if your control system goes haywire, you also have a system that's capable of ripping your leg off. And that continues to be a challenge with exoskeletons of all sorts. And we actually have a way to solve that. But I just give that as an example of when you're new to a field and you don't really know what to expect. you're going to have breakthroughs. You're also going to understand what's really practical. And I would say that the story of HaptX is half and half, a combination of technology development and business development. Because if we had pursued that path of an exoskeleton, we do some really interesting engineering, no question about that. We'd probably also be out of business because you have to be able to provide interesting products that are useful to people who are actually going to buy them along a path that could be a 20-year development path. And so that's why we are where we are right now with gloves. Gloves, we had no intention either from the start or currently of being just a glove company. We are a natural haptics company, and gloves, using the hands are an important but not complete part of that picture.
Thank you for saying that. So it's important people understand there's way more and way more coming too, which is exciting. So you touched a little bit also on my next question. You keep stealing my questions.
Sorry about that.
No. This is an exciting interview. I love how you break it down. So you talked about your hardware approach and how you get into that. But gloves are not something new. They've been there for a while, including the wired glove, I think, in 1977. You have the Nintendo's Power Glove in 1987. Yep. What are the challenges? Why now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, we could not have built this glove 10 years ago. And if you wait another 10 years from now, the glove will have been built. So we had a very narrow window of opportunity in which to become the company that we are. And a simple answer goes back to it's really hard to do haptics. Let me rephrase that. It's really hard to do natural haptics. It's really hard to do haptics that are at a level where your brain believes the immersion that the haptics are creating. And it's interesting. If you get above a threshold, I can't quantify this. Even as a biomedical engineer, I can't quantify this, but there's this noticeable perception limit where if you're above that, your brain is your best friend. Your brain will fill in missing pieces of information. We've had people who try our gloves and they rave about how when the little fox runs around your hand and lies down, you can feel its body warmth. And of course, in our current gloves, we don't have thermal control in our gloves, but your brain has evolved to fill in missing pieces of information as long as it's good enough. So if you get over this arbitrary threshold of believability, then your brain is your best friend. If you're below that, it's going to feel uncanny. It's not going to feel natural, and you're continually fighting about trying to force an experience. And so our thesis, this is consistent with when Jake originally called me up and said, "Hey, I got this idea." Our thesis has been that let's build a system that is natural haptics. Cost be damned, target audience be damned. We'll figure that out later. Let's do it right, not do it easy. It would be much easier to do piezoelectric actuators, for example, something solid state to provide our actuation. And of course, we evaluated that. We evaluated back when we started. We looked at every single possible actuator that's out there that existed, that will exist, that has the possibility of existing. And it wasn't an easy choice to settle in on pneumatics, on a fluidic control system, our little air, essentially array of balloons that gives the sensation. That's kind of a ridiculous engineering solution because it requires hundreds of individual valves and hundreds of individual channels of air and a lot of places where things can go wrong. So it's kind of an engineering nightmare to create the system that we did. And we didn't do that for fun. We did that because there was no other way to achieve the scalability and the amount of deflection it needs. You need to push into the skin by sometimes multiple millimeters, depending on where you are on the body. And you just can't do that with piezoelectrics, and you will never be able to do that with the more straightforward system. So that was kind of a long-winded answer to a simple question, but it's a matter of we have always been technology agnostic. We want to create natural haptics. We want to get above that level of immersion. And if a new technology comes along, a new, thermal actuated polymer that has a high enough refresh rate and a good enough force displacement curve, we'll do it. We'll take it on. We're not wed to anything except for that goal of tricking the brain.
I love that. And thank you for also touching on the lower threshold for uncanny. I was about to ask if that was something that you felt at some point, and I've personally felt, and I'm excited for also the multi-sensory of mixing vibrotactile, thermal, and so on. But it's interesting the example that you gave, that if the brain is full enough, it's so malleable that it will actually create those effects, even though they are not physically there. And it's
to a point. It's still, you have to get pretty close.
100%. Awesome. So I will touch on another question that's kind of related when it comes to my personal preference of technology, which is XR. And I feel like haptics is part of XR as a whole ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of buzz and speculation around XR, AR, and robotic space. What do people need to know?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we are absolutely in the middle of XR. Even though VR is what we generally have our users involved with is training and simulation in a virtual environment. One of the projects that some of you may have seen on YouTube if you searched around and found some videos with our telerobot system. We had Jeff Bezos using this kind of frightening looking teleoperation system. And that's a good example of, you can call it XR. We're mixing, in the teleoperation system, we have a stereoscopic vision. So you actually are looking at the real world, but we can mix that with a game engine world. We can gamify a real environment to help control remotely the operation of a robotic system with very precise hands.
And
so again,
to the digital space, which I'm working in at Unity, which is about how do you help people working remotely, but having the level of precision of being on site.
Exactly. And it really all does come back to the hands, is that whether you're looking at the physical world or some mixed world or virtual world, interacting with things that are part of the computer generated environment, you need the same level of haptics. So it really doesn't change things whether it's VR or AR or some sort of mixed reality. You still need that haptic sensation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was very clear. Another hard part I feel about haptics is always money, creating a viable business model and audience. Can you tell us more about your challenges in that area?
Yeah, so we have over the last 10 years raised over $30 million, and we're continually raising money because hardware is expensive. It takes a lot of money to get a product as complex as haptic gloves out to market. And so that's been a really interesting part of the whole HaptX experience is what do we do with the limited resources that we have at any given point in time to get to the next level. And early on, again, I would like to have you picture in your head a 20-year-old college dropout and a washed-up college professor going to venture capitalists with this vision of a machine that you can't tell the difference between reality and virtual reality. We had a lot of challenges with credibility early on, and what changed the conversation was not that they didn't believe that the vision could be achieved. Usually, in the 50-hour slot that we got with an investor, or 50-minute slot, 45 minutes of that time would be convincing them that this vision actually is achievable. And by the end of that period, they would agree, nod their heads along, that yeah, somebody's going to do it. The next important question is, why you? Why not somebody else, somebody who's better funded, somebody who has more experience, any number of reasons why you wouldn't believe that we could do this. And that was a significant barrier. And as I started to say, what changed that conversation is prototypes, is being able to bring physical hardware. And our first prototype that we had really shopped around was a box about the size of a small refrigerator that we would plunk down on a table, and you'd actually put your hand up underneath, up against the plate, and that had thermal and tactile sensations. And you would, in a virtual reality environment with a controller in one hand, you'd see your avatar hand, and you'd put a banana in your hand and bounce it around, or we had a can of soda, and you could actually feel the temperature change. And we had, honest to God, we had venture capitalists who would take off the headset and look in the box to see where the banana was, because they could not believe that this was generated in a virtual environment. And so that really did change the conversation from something that sounds audacious and why should you be the ones who do it, to something that okay, I can now see the vision. It's a long way away, but I can see the vision. And so we slowly, step by step, prototype by prototype, worked our way up to larger investments until where we are right now. And where we are right now, with the introduction of the DK2 a while back, is that we have our systems out in the wild being used by all the big companies, all the branches of the military, a lot of real, top name, well-known companies as our early customers. And again, that changes the conversation once more, where it's not about can it be done. Yes, it can be done, and it's not about can you do it. Yeah, you can. You built some hardware, you can do it. It's more a question about, well, is the world ready for this? Is this something that people will actually buy? Our system is not inexpensive, and so we've now kind of crossed all these different hurdles, and we're really poised at a very exciting stage. And I would love to share with you all, what's behind this door back here. And I can't go into the major details, but I think it's safe to say that anybody who's been following HaptX for any length of time knows that we're on a 1 or 2 year cycle for hardware. And wow, it's been a while since we introduced the DK2. So expect some neat things in the not too distant future.
I love that. So we're about at the end of this session. I'm going to move to the future of haptics section, where Ashley is going to ask you a question. But I just wanted to recap a little bit of what you just said, which was very interesting. I had the last question about what would make a demo exciting, right? And you basically said it, like, it's not just about the money. If you can convince, and if you can do prototypes and prove, then basically you can do anything. And I think this is a very inspiring blueprint that you're laying down, sharing your own knowledge and your experience in this field, having built it up from the bottom. And to me, at least for people that are experimenting and playing with new technology, it gives hope about the future that anyone can do it still. So thank you for that, Bob. And Ashley, back to you for the future of haptics questions.
Awesome. Yeah, that was super insightful. I really love an origin story. And I think it's great for people to hear that you have one that's not like stereotypical. It's not cookie cutter. It's a mishmash of people doing very different things and coming together to build based on a vision. So love that so much. Even the Haptics Club, we each have very different backgrounds and areas of expertise and levels of education and hobbies, and it makes us all very unique and great at what we do. And together we can do amazing things. So it's similar that way. Very cool. So speaking of the future of haptics, I want to touch upon something that kind of leads towards making the future better, which is like current challenges. Yep. Can you tell us a little bit, and you've already touched upon it, but I want to just kind of arrow focus on it. Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that like you're facing now, or some of the challenges that you see that kind of the haptics industry, haptics folks in your space are kind of encountering over the next few years?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we're at a point in our company's evolution and our product's evolution where the initial wow factor has already been out there. I mean, you yourself said it's a great experience. When people try it for the first time, it's like, yes, that only gets you so far. There's a follow-up required to that where okay, yeah, it's neat. So what? And that so what is when you transition from something that's a novelty to something that's a useful tool. And in our case, that means a useful enterprise tool. We're marketing our gloves squarely at the enterprise market, because it is an expensive product, and it can do so much for use cases in the enterprise world with companies who are involved in simulation and training. That really is our area of early adopters. So So the challenge now is really not a technology challenge for us. I mean, there's still many technologies at different stages of development, and of course, we're not at the finish line with our own selected technologies. But it's really at this point less about the technology and more about executing with a product that's at the right price point, that does the right things for the right audience, and that's not an easy problem to quantify. So we've spent, and people like Joe have spent a lot of time out on the road with our DK2, with other demos, listening and really understanding what early customers want from our system. And that's led to some design decisions that have prioritized some features over other features. And thermal is a great example. That's something that we learned about early on. It's really neat. It's amazing to have a system where you can fill a soda can. Is that something that people are willing to pay for the extra complexity that goes into a product to have thermal? Questionable at this point. It will absolutely be something that it's on our roadmap. We know we're going to have gloves that have thermal in them at some point in time. But that's an example of a nice to have instead of a need to have. And if you're not careful as a startup company and you mix those up and you get enamored by your own technology, you can end up with spending a lot of money on products that just miss the mark a little bit. They're neat, and everybody will agree they're neat, but you can die as a company with a neat product.
Ain't that the truth? That's going back to the business model. If you can't solve that at the basic level, then you don't really have a company. You just have something really cool, which is fun.
Don't get me wrong. I am the first one in line to be all for something that's fun that has no market. But you do have to ask, well, okay, how are you going to do that? If it's a little bit higher than a hobby level, how are you going to create something fun with somebody else's money that really, that ends up with a satisfactory endpoint for everyone? That's a challenge.
Mighty challenge. Before I jump into the last question, which is my favorite question, I wanted to just give folks who are listening an idea of some of the use cases that maybe stand out to you that the DK1 has just solved. Because maybe they haven't had the experience of testing it. Maybe they haven't had the experience of just understanding its abilities and all the amazing things that it can do. Like everyone's seen the Jeff Bezos robot arms at this point. But like, what can it do? What are things that people should look out for? And even companies who are listening that have training needs, like what can this thing do, and what should we look out for?
Yeah, so VR, and I'm talking about enterprise customers, companies that are big companies. They have big research groups. They've been in VR forever, for the last 20 years, or they never left VR from the early 80s. These are very sophisticated users, and they know that VR is the right way to go with simulation and training. To have a computer-generated environment as opposed to a physical environment for things that are expensive or put their trainees at risk. Or you want to run through multiple scenarios, that's a no-brainer. Every single one of those folks that we've talked to, though, to a person, has said that the reason they don't do more in VR simulation and training is because the immersion is broken when you're back to hand controllers and pointing and not interacting naturally. And in fact, for many things, and it could be as simple as early pilot training where you're just learning the muscle memory of flipping switches overhead and turning knobs and orienting yourself to a cockpit, or controlling a control panel or something that's pretty simple but very important. If you don't have natural motions, the training that results from that is actually negative training. It's worse than not training at all, because you're learning to do things with pointing and clicking and mouse moves and a way that isn't natural. So VR is recognized as for all the benefits it does have. But what you need is a pair of gloves that lets you interact with things in that virtual environment. And there are a number of gloves out there, but our gloves really are, as we've been alluding to, the natural haptics they give you a sensation between the fact that they're physically stopping your hand from going through a virtual coffee mug. You're going to feel that solidness of an object that you're grasping. And of course, we have 133 individual touch pixels on each hand, and that produces, it's all driven by Unity or Unreal. It's the physics engines under these game engines that are describing exactly the pattern of touch that you would expect if you were contacting a real object. So you get that combination of your hands stopping and a pattern of touch that is what your body would expect. And the end result is that you truly think you're interacting with something solid. So that's what our gloves do. And the use cases for that, simulation training, absolutely, but also design. Think of a car manufacturer that's doing the interior of a new car. The visualization is very important, but they still spend millions of dollars and months of times developing mock-ups of an interior for something as simple as, what does it take to reach over and close the glove box? What's the tactile sensation of putting your seat back? All of these sort of things, because their customers are human and humans touch things, the more that you can get a simulation of that accurately early in the design process, the more a company can save a lot of time and a lot of money. So those are some examples: simulation, training, design. We absolutely will get into entertainment. So we're not trying for a consumer product in the near future. It will work its way into the consumer market at some point in time, whether that's us or a licensee. I think it's more likely that you'd see our technology in a location-based entertainment scenario where you go somewhere and experience this. And so that's something that is absolutely another important use case. It's just the market isn't quite ready for that yet. So again, you have to combine the technology development with the business development and be very mindful and planful about how those two match up as you evolve.
That's awesome. Oh, you got me super excited on mentioning consumer, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask after. Because it's such an amazing experience, it feels like it would definitely be important in the future for consumers to be able to experience what it's like to be able to make something feel as realistic as possible. But I won't dive into that now. Right now, it's the juiciest question of them all, the most important question to me, which is the future of haptics. Where do you see the haptics industry, your industry, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So the good news is there's room for everybody. That is genuinely true, and we've seen that firsthand in our interaction with customers. Is there's not going to be, in my opinion, a single haptics platform or technology or price point or user. There's going to be an opportunity for small devices, for big devices, for special purpose devices, for general devices, and that really is good news. So I would never turn my nose up at a haptics technology that doesn't provide the same sort of performance that ours does. That's a misleading statement or judgment to make. I think that the technology will evolve, but we kind of know what's out there now. So until there's a few, we're a few more years down the road with some of the actuator technologies that are in the labs that are not quite ready for prime time, I don't think you're going to see that much of a difference in the hardware side. You'll see very creative combinations of hardware that are really tuned towards a particular use. And so there'll be much, much better experiences, not because of magic technology, but because people have really started to get out there and understand how to incorporate haptics in their daily life.
Super exciting. Thanks so much for sharing your insights there. I love that so much. So true. So very true. Before we close out, I want to hand the mic to you, Bob. If you have any kind of closing thoughts, if there's anything that we didn't ask you that we wish you did get asked, just take a minute to tell people even more about where to find you, what to look forward to. Sure.
Well, it's easy to find us. You can do a YouTube search or just look at our website at haptx.com. And as I alluded to earlier, stay tuned. I think that you're going to see some interesting things in the not too distant future about where we are as a company. I think a little bit longer cycle, you're going to continue to see some interesting things. We've said we're not stopping at hands. There's some neat opportunities on the horizon to extend force feedback and haptics from your hands to your upper body to your lower body to eventually get to that machine that you strap into and can walk, run, fly, somersault in an infinite universe, feeling that you're actually there. So that is absolutely part of our core DNA, and we will get there. Along the way, there's going to be some really interesting products that are steps on that path, and we're just delighted to be part of this industry because it is a very, very exciting time for haptics. It's a very exciting time for VR and XR and AR as things evolve. And what we've really found is that the community, such as this group, is a huge part of that. It's not being driven by the end users. It requires us to sort of lead everybody to the promised land of a future where haptics is much more part of daily life, and where VR and XR, AR is complemented by the sense of touch.
It's awesome. And if anyone's listening and you have a chance to check out the demo, it's a DK2 gloves. I said DK1 earlier. DK2, definitely check it out. It's one of those experiences that will you'll have an awe face, and you probably won't say much. You'll enjoy it. It's really cool. So thanks, Bob, for joining us. For anyone listening, this is where we cut it off. This is where the recording stops and we ask the juicy questions that you've always wanted to ask. But be sure to stick around. Thehapticsclub.com is where you'll find all the latest info. You can send us a tip so we can continue buying our coffee fix. You can check out who the next guests are going to be. You can join our newsletter so you can be first to hear all the latest releases. But we're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast. We're everywhere. We're also on Twitter at Haptics Club. And we're just excited for you to join us. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we look forward to hosting Sarah Price at our next Haptics Club event.